I'm really delighted today. I get to introduce my friend and Dharma brother here on the east side of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, in the U.S., Mike Mui Lewis. Mui is a Zen priest in the White Plum lineage, a Dharma holder, trained psychotherapist. He works with addiction counseling. We were just talking beforehand. He's got almost 2 dozen private practice clients that he sees every week right now. Plus, he's teaching at Naropa University, and he still uh, finds time to climb and adventure, which he has done professionally as a mountain guide for, I think, probably, I don't know the dates, Mui, but probably most of his adult life. And I have, uh, my skills in the outdoor don't even come close to Mui's, but that was my business for 40 years, working in the outdoor business. So I cross over a little bit with what it is that he's done. So I'm gonna mute myself. I'm gonna hand the talking stick to my friend Mui, and Mui, go ahead and please take over here.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. And welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Um, and looking out, I see many familiar faces. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to all the new faces that I haven't met before. So I'm in Colorado right now at Great Mountain Zen Center. This is a small abbey, and we have a Sangha led by the teachers Jerry Shishin Wick Roshi and Ilya Shinko Perez Roshi, and we're in the White Plum lineage. Originally, Myoshin asked if I would give a talk on the name of my counseling uh, um, company, my LLC, which is Zen Adventure Therapy. It was some kind of like, wow, those words, how they go together. What does that mean? Can you talk about that? So I had thought about that and what I would say. And adventure is a really important part of my life and has been an important part of my practice. And therapy is part of an important part of my life as well. And so maybe I'll give us some background on that. But then recently, just a couple nights ago or a few nights ago, I was contemplating, what I was going to say today, and I just realized that my awareness was taken by what's happening in Eastern Europe right now, which is very saddening. And there were many years where I lived on the road. I lived in a van for about 15 years, just traveling around rock climbing, mountain guiding, living in Buddhist monasteries, and avoiding politics. I never listened to the news. I just really had shut that part of the world out of my awareness. And I was an environmental activist, but I was what I consider to be a grassroots activist and taking people into the wilderness, helping them find connection to nature so that when they went back into the world, that connection that they had, that relationship would somehow influence their decision making. And I worked largely with privileged um, teens and young adults. Uh, and I liked that I was having an influence on people who would be in, uh, who would largely be in power positions of power, making big decisions. So I'd hoped that that connection would do that. And then um, once I sort of got off the road, so to speak, then my attention really went towards deepening my Zen training and my practice, which for me has been sort of a metaphorical cave for many years. Again, where I wasn't interested in what was going on around the world. And I was just really focused on what was happening inside my own mind and body, and really concentrating on meditation and undoing the psychological knots, the karmic knots that were keeping me from experiencing a deeper realization of true nature of self, me. And then it's really only been in the last couple years that I started opening back up, that I started coming out of that cave again and opening back up and seeing what was going on out there in the world. And I have to say, it's quite overwhelming at times. And my partner, I have a partner who lives in Boulder. She's a Vajrayana practitioner, a very serious practitioner. And she just said to me the other day, we were having dinner, and she had actually been in retreat, a virtual retreat with her teacher for 8 days, and came out. And I saw her that night that she came out, and she caught a wind of the news. And she said, I really try to avoid the news. I try to avoid all of that mess. And all it took was one little hit of it. And I just can't stop crying about it. And so she started crying right there. What I find is that practice, it really sheds the layers of defense, um, of separation, of distinction. And so many of us become, as we practice, we become very sensitive to what's happening around us, to the people directly around us, to the living beings, the non-living beings, and to the world events. And so I know that I'm speaking to a group of ZPI folks, and I don't know how you all engage personally, but I know that ZPI as a organization is an engaged program. So I really respect the people who can really get out there in their communities, or even on a larger platform, a global platform, with the intention to make change and keep doing it day after day, or week after week, or month after month. I really applaud your efforts, and I'm very impressed, because for me it's very painful. And luckily I have my practice. My practice is how I manage my pain, the pain that I feel in relation to what's going on out there, the empathy that I feel. And this brings me to this word adventure today. This word adventure includes risk for something unknown to happen in the future. So stepping out of a comfort zone, taking a risk, being willing to let go of something. What's being let go of is unknown. What's being gained or experienced or learned is unknown. And I know that's the first tenet of the Zen peacemakers, is this not knowing, and this willingness to lean into that and swim into it, dive into it. For me, when I think of adventure, this feeling of fun and excitement arises, which the word excitement is also part of the definition of adventure, from what I found. There's an excitement to it. And I like being excited. That's a feeling I like. Which is interesting, because I've read some recent research in that the feeling of excitement is actually very similar to the feeling of fear. There's only slight differences that's happening in the brain between those two. But there's this energy that comes along with excitement, this joy of what's happening. And for many years, I've lived a life of adventure that's taken form externally and then internally. And actually, my very first Kensho happened when I was 18 years old and I was rock climbing. It was my very first time rock climbing. And I was at this place called Winkler's Creek near the town of Boone, North Carolina. And I was climbing with some other very experienced climbers. And I took my first moves up a small boulder. It was a ropeless climb up a short boulder. And everything just exploded inside. And I couldn't move after. I had to go sit down on this boulder and just by this beautiful creek and just experience. I just sat there in a state of experiencing for probably an hour to 2 hours, and I just watched and listened and felt. And so for me, this aspect of nature and adventure and body oriented movement has been incorporated or infused in practice from the very beginning. And so that has been part of my practice for a long time. And what I have noticed over many years of being around lots of different practitioners, including myself, is that there can be this tendency to lean towards comfort, which I think we all do. All human beings do to a large degree or some degree. We seek comfort, we seek places of familiarity, people of familiarity within ourselves or avoiding ourselves, things that are more comfortable externally. Or we add substances to our body that make things more comfortable. We choose to be around people that make our internal state feel more comfortable. And what I respect about many of you, or all of you, and people who are activists out in the world is this willingness to be in uncomfortable situations. And actually, what I have found as an adventurer and a risk taker is that the zone of risk can then actually become expanded and include what used to be uncomfortable. And I bet for many of you who are serious practitioners, you've seen how your realm of comfort expands over time as we sit more and more with our bodies and experience the discomfort that happens through physical pain of being on the cushion or in the chair, as well as the mental pain of seeing what happens in the mind and all the crazy stuff that goes on up there. And then also the emotional discomfort that happens from being in community in a sangha, or with coworkers or with people who don't get what you're trying to, in the ways that you're trying to serve. But also this just emotional pain that arises internally, from our own triggers of shame, guilt, hurt, fear, sadness, powerlessness. So it's quite an adventure to go into the body, quite a risk to go in and feel and experience and be with, bear witness. And yet, in Buddhism, in spirituality, there's this tendency to bypass. And I wonder how you all relate to that, because I think we all do it to some degree or large degree. How we use our spiritual practice, how we use external activity to bypass what's happening in our own psychological karmic unfolding. Sometimes I look at how busy my life can be at times and I wonder, what am I avoiding? What risk am I unwilling to take? And I think about that in my practice. I'm sure many of you have too, where there was a period of practice where you're very excited and very motivated. And so you really give yourself to it and you move through something and you have an insight, you have some kind of shift or realization. And then we're at a new plateau or a new place in the hero's journey, that place of comfort and manifesting. And then we start to dip down and there's some kind of thing that calls us deeper into the cave again. But this time it feels a little too much. It would require too much of a lifestyle change. It would require too much letting go. And for me, I know in the past there were calls into the darkness that I couldn't avoid. They were just unavoidable. I had to do them, or else I was not going to continue to exist. But I notice some of the calls now are less like they're less. They don't have that absolute necessity that they once did. And so it's easier to resist them. It's easier to say no and keep doing what I'm doing. And so I'm having to look at that in myself in certain ways and question, is there a fear of some avoidance here, something I'm avoiding? And right now for me, one of those things is engaging actually more externally in a world of systemic oppression, in a world filled with narcissism, antisocial behavior, in a world that really seems unfixable at moments or at times or for big chunks of time for me. As a therapist, everybody, engineers, people in technology, social scientists, psychologists, Buddhists, we probably all have our idea where it's like, okay, if this would happen, then the world would change in this really big positive way. And for me, one of those things is from a therapist perspective, each person's pain in their life and the ways that they defend themselves and the ways that they seek outside of themselves to find that comfort within largely comes from early childhood issues, early childhood attachments to parents or lack of attachments to parents, divorce and separation that happened early in childhood, chaotic households, needs not being met for nutrition, for love, not enough eye contact. And there's plenty of research that shows this. And so there's this chain reaction of karmic events that starts with this early childhood events, these early childhood events that then turn into anxiety or nervous system issues that then turn into substance use or unhealthy relationships or other unhealthy behaviors that then move into adulthood and that continue and then turn into materialism, consumerism, other ways of trying to satisfy that discomfort of the body that is left over from some of these early childhood events. So, boy, if we focused on helping people become better parents, making sure that children are in happy homes and healthy homes, and pregnant women are really well taken care of so that they don't have to feel anxiety, so that they're not using drugs or alcohol while they're pregnant. All these kinds of things, boy, that would make such a big difference. And it wouldn't be immediate. That change we would not see immediate. It would happen over a long period of time. And then there's this other angle. Boy, if everyone would just meditate. I remember when I graduated from my graduate degree in counseling from Naropa, which was a contemplative program, meaning that a contemplative therapist is someone who meditates and has a deep practice, so that when they work with their clients, they have worked through a lot of their own stuff and are bringing a lot of self-awareness and presence into the counseling room. And I came out of that program, and I would just work with clients, and every single client in front of me, I would just like, if they would just meditate a lot of their problems would just vanish. So I felt very discouraged. So I actually didn't feel great working as a therapist right away. Then I got in the world a bit. I got out in the world a little bit and realized, well, I came into contact with my own humanity and dropped my own. I came into contact with my own idealism as well, um, of how the world should be, of how people should be, how I should be. And as I came into contact with the world as it was and as it is, I realized that my ideal version of the world and the world itself were two very different things. And so as I dropped my own fantasies and came into contact with thusness more and more and more, and especially my own thusness, and really came to just radically accept all my flaws, my strengths, my limitations, then that just naturally moved out into the world around me. And I was much more able to accept all of that. So then it makes me more able to work with people in a way that feels really wonderful. You know, people, I just had 3 sessions this morning before this talk, a couple session, 2 individual sessions. Everybody's struggling really painfully, you know, and I cry with these people and I laugh with these people. And I see the suffering right there in just a single human being. And then I look out at what's happening in Ukraine, and someone like Putin. I mean, Putin's not a mystery to me at all. He's not a mystery whatsoever. And I can put a diagnostic label on him. He's very easy to diagnose, as many dictators are, and people drawn to positions of power like that. Very easily diagnosable. So of course he's going to do these things. Of course he's going to try to get into positions of power. And of course he's going to manipulate and control everyone around him and make them all scared to say anything against him because of what will happen. So if that's an of course, and this diagnosis that I could put on him, I can easily look back to how it happened. I can look back to early childhood issues. Certain diagnosable issues happen before the age of 2. Before the age of 2. So someone doesn't even have a choice in how they become as a person. And so all of us, most human beings, we are, our general constitution is set up by the age of 6 to 10 years old. And then our brain finishes development by the age of 25. But really, how we've learned to deal with the world, how we've learned to deal with adversity, has already been set up by about the age of 6 to 10 years old. But then some of these other, like, pretty severe personality issues are already actually in place by the age of about 2. And researchers don't know if it's genetic or if it's nature or nurture. They don't know if it's genetic or if it's conditioned. Either way, it's there. about 1 to 2% of the world's population has just one of these severe personality disorders. And then you look at the other personality disorders, and each one is around 1 to 2%. And there's about 10 of those personality disorders. Now, some of those are crossovers. So you can have someone with 2 personality disorders. They meet criteria for 2 personality disorders. And what it speaks to is a set of behaviors that are pretty consistent with the original wound. So I won't go into the original wound anymore. But anyway, so I look at someone like Putin, and it's like, okay, this guy's really easily understood as to why he is and how he is and why he fought to be in the position that he's in. It still doesn't make my feelings go away. It's still sad. It's still painful to watch humanity unfold in the way that it does. You know, I have even very realized teachers that I've met that are beyond Zen, but spiritual teachers, I still see some idealism that happens at times that is not necessarily in alignment with the reality that's happening. And that idealism, that separation between what reality is and what we want reality to be, that distance is the degree to which we suffer. Now, it doesn't mean, now where someone might take that is like, well, shouldn't we have hopes for the world? Isn't that important? That's a good question. The teachings that I've received, and I really appreciate this from my teachers, is that we drop all of this idealism, we drop all the ideas, we drop all the hopes, and we function naturally out of our own prajna, out of our own deep wisdom, without concept. And so each of us, each human being, is drawn to function and act in the world in a certain way that is unique to that individual. And so some people are going to be drawn towards activism. Some people are going to be drawn towards caveism. Some people are going to be drawn towards very deep practice and really, really mastering meditation. Other people are going to be drawn to meditate a little bit and then be very active in the world. And if we come from a place of non-duality, then it's neither good nor bad. It just is. But idealism includes some version of duality, I think. It's the first time I've ever said that. I'd have to think about it, but it feels right. So personally, I really like this practice, and it's how I function at this point, thanks to the training of my teachers. But if we look at it as an idea, it means that there's not some kind of thing or way that the world should be or can be, which is maybe in direct conflict to a book that's come out in the last few years by Norman Fisher, the way the world could be other, which I haven't read, so I don't really know what's in there. But the title itself is kind of in direct conflict to what I'm saying. But the world just is. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be. And we're going to do what we're going to do. And if we have any internal conflict about it, that means we haven't taken care of something that's deep inside yet. That means there's some kind of idea that's in conflict to an internal calling that we have. Yeah, so I really like this idea of, and it puts me at ease to trust that each person is unfolding karmically the way that they have to. It couldn't be another way. Millions and millions and millions of causes lead to every single momentary effect. Could Putin be another way? Could things be in the world right now another way in this moment? And the activism that many people are drawn to do towards systemic racism, systemic homophobia, systemic sexism, systemic ableism, systemic oppression against socioeconomic groups. That activism couldn't be any other way. As soon as we think that one thing is wonderful and another thing is not, we've already lost our sense of reality. We've already fallen into a dualistic impression, into a set of concepts. I think. I'm only speaking from my experience. I don't expect anybody to ever believe anything I say. But I think we're challenged. You know, we come to these talks because I go to a lot of them myself. We come to these talks to gain a new perspective, to be challenged, to take something away. Sometimes we come to be validated. I'm typically not a speaker that validates people's experiences too much. Sometimes I do as a therapist. But you know, I always come back to, this is my favorite, probably my favorite book in the world that I've ever read, and I've read it many, many times, the Tao Te Ching. And Lao Tzu says, the master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think that they know. Practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. So isn't this that not doing? Not doing means just not having a concept about what we're doing. It's just doing. If you're drawn towards activism, you do activism. If you're drawn towards taking a break and taking a nap, then you do that. Now I'll finish up here in a minute so we can have some Q&A. But I work at Naropa University, and you know, Naropa has a very strong commitment towards Jedi. And Jedi is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so we get a lot of training and do a lot of intentional empowerment and destabilizing to try to create an environment of equity. And it's tricky territory because it brings up a lot of pain in people who, with privilege, like myself. You know, we all have privilege to some degree, but there's different types of privilege. And I have certain layers of privilege that create a bias, that create ignorance. And I can own that. And it's painful to know that I'm ignorant to something that I can't not be ignorant to. I have to do my work, and I try to do my work. But ignorance is pervasive, isn't it? It's one of the three poisons. So how could the world be other? Do we expect that humanity is going to be without ignorance, without clinging, without aversion? Or can we accept that that's just a reality of the human experience? One question I'll finish with here too is the human race supposed to survive? Are we supposed to continue? Is there a belief that you carry around that? Now, we might have a feeling of it too. Maybe there's a feeling of that, but that might be different from a belief about it. I wonder what our Mother Earth says about it. I wonder what the stars in the sky say about it. So I do want to apologize. I'm not always such a downer. I woke up this way today. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sad. But if you knew me personally, you'd know that I'm actually a really happy, friendly person. That's a jokes. I'm a bit of a jokester. So, with that, I'll finish and open it up to Q&A. And just so you know, anything that you say that's in opposition to anything I said is fine. I might feel hurt, and that's okay. And I'm a big boy; I can handle it. And yeah, I would love to hear your discussion on anything that I said or anything that you want to share about your feelings that's going on in the world today. Because oh, I think someone maybe unmuted themselves. Hold on. Um, because one of my intentions coming in today was to provide an opportunity for anyone to share anything that they wanted to say about what they're feeling or experiencing in relation to our current events, which mostly I just spoke about what's happening in Eastern Europe, but we're experiencing um, an environmental crisis that's not going away anytime soon. So I think we're all entering a time that we're going to see a lot of change, and there's going to be struggle that's coming our way. And I feel very lucky to have the depth of Buddhist practice that I have available to me, because that is ultimately my refuge. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are right here. I can take them wherever I go. They're with me all the time. There's overpopulation that we're experiencing, which I don't hear so much about that. I think as a human race, it's like we don't want to name it, but there's too many of us on this planet right now. I don't think it's sustainable. And maybe you could say it's the way we're doing it. It's the way we're doing it that's not sustainable. Either way, human beings have the three poisons, and I don't know if we're gonna make changes in the way we do things drastically anytime soon. So there's too many of us, I think. So a lot of stuff that we're dealing with right now, a new era that I think we were ignorant to, or many of us were ignorant to for a long time. I'm only 47, so I know that some of you here that are older, have seen this coming for since before I was born. Anyway, let's open it up. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Mui. And we're a small enough group that we can see everybody. So I don't know if you want to, if you'd like to use your electronic hand, um, it's down under reactions. I just put mine up. Um, or just raise your actual hand and unmute yourself and comment, question, challenge, observe, share something personal. We've got I don't know, 15 minutes or more here till the bottom of the hour. Myoshin, Arizona Myoshin.
Thank you, Mui. So it's pretty sad to hear that. Jeff, could you turn off your mic? Okay. It's sad to hear that Putin is pretty damaged from age 2, but does he have Buddha nature? And is he redeemable?
I think if we open it up, everybody would have a different answer to that question, which is why it's such a wonderful koan. So if I was answering this like a traditional koan, I would just give Putin a big hug. So that's one answer. Another answer is in the idea of the word redeemable, there's already a duality there. It means there's a problem, right? So if we look from a dualistic angle, is he redeemable? Probably not. Is he changeable? Probably not. If we look at statistics. But, can people learn things over time? Sure. But if he is what I think, if what's going on with him is what I think is going on with him, then no, it doesn't change for most people with that issue. Yeah, I think there was another question you asked, but I forgot.
Thanks, Myoshin. Anyone else have a comment or question?
I have a comment.
Well, Ovidio had a
Yes.
hand up.
Well, I want to share my opinion about the seriousness that what's going on, and I can understand Mike's feelings. And maybe because I'm outside the United States, what I want to share is how can our knowledge of Zen and Buddhism help understand what went wrong. And I need to go back to before the invasion. All right. So I am a psychiatrist and I work in the field of emotional intelligence in the schools, teaching. And I was thinking, all of us learn how to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So what was Putin saying? Putin was saying, I need a commitment from NATO that Ukraine will not join NATO because I feel threatened. All the former Soviet republics are part of NATO, and they have received soldiers and new armament. And I don't know if you know this, but when Germany was reunited, Gorbachev received an assurance that NATO would not expand like it did to all those countries that have bordered with the USSR, with Russia. Okay, I think Putin is horrible leader. He may be paranoid, but some people say even paranoids have enemies, So Putin wanted an assurance that was not given to him. Once the war starts, it has a dynamic of its own. A lot of the things he says, he's talking to the Russians, not to the outside world. He's talking to the Russians. So I think the principle of letting go and not knowing, they were not this is in politics, it's very good, very difficult. People are very rigid, they know the truth. So I think I'm very, very concerned because he has a nuclear capacity. And I think at a deeper level, he showed he's not a paper tiger. You know this expression, paper tiger. He said, I will not accept Ukraine in NATO. And I think, I am afraid, he may be crazy enough to push a button. I don't know if you guys heard, and you have to stop me when I go too long, but I read about when during the Trump, and when Trump had this Korean crazy dictator, and he was fighting with Trump. I heard story that the chiefs of staff had an agreement among them. If Trump would say, send a rocket, they will not send. They will not obey Trump because Trump is deranged like Putin, right? So I think the threat of nuclear war, so I think the most important thing we can do now as citizens, activists, is against escalation. Sending, the West is sending arms, for what? Are going to have how many months of fighting and destruction? So I don't see voices. I read New York Times every day. I have subscription. I don't see any recommendation. Of course, I heard Chomsky.
A video.
Chomsky is
A video.
Yes.
I just want to interrupt a little bit. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Just for time's sake, and I want to hear for some other people. I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't want to get into much of a political conversation on a conceptual level. But what I hear and what you're saying is frustration. I hear frustration, if that's true. And the question you opened your comment with was so important. How do we use our practice to handle and to step up to the challenges that we're facing today? Because these challenges are big. And how does our practice impact that? How does our practice influence this?
I will finish with one sentence. We have to let go of our preconceptions. Otherwise, we'll not find a solution. Mm-hmm. And if he is crazy, it's our responsibility to present something new.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Who else?
I have a comment.
Please, Ken.
Well, I can identify very strongly with early childhood trauma. And I'm not here to tell my story and people pitying me, but at 3 months old, I had polio, and I was separated from my family for about a month. When I came back, my dad said, he told me that, and he actually told my brother this, I didn't hear it, but he said that I was a different child. I was withdrawn. Something was missing. And things got worse from that point on. I was less than and all those things. Now, I've been practicing for a long time. And even though I have some tools, it's very easy for that wounded child to want to take over. And just recently, I did a little at a 12-step meeting. I volunteered to lead, and it was chaos. I didn't get the outcomes together, so I didn't get my material, and I felt horrible, and it went okay. But last night I sat down, put my phone timer for an hour of just quiet, and things came to the surface. I wrote the guy who was running the meeting, and it came out of my heart, and that's what heals me. Thank you for listening today.
Ken, thank you so much for your vulnerability, and I want to show you this. I have 3 sticky notes down here, and this is one of them that I brought today. So in case you don't know the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there's another layer, there's another version of this that's really beautiful too, that's very practice oriented, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me.
That's a new line I haven't heard for. We say that prayer so much in recovery, I think it loses its power. It's just becomes something we repeat over and over. So anyway,
I saw Graham's hand up.
Just to put in a little levity, your question, Mike, about can we survive, should we survive, will we survive, put me in mind of a cartoon I saw quite recently. 3 dinosaur figures piloting a spaceship towards Earth, saying, "At last, we're nearly home. Let's hope the monkeys haven't touched anything." Now, I think from that I draw the hope that life in some form must continue, but whether it'll continue in our ape form, we just have to hope that it will, but trust that if it doesn't, something will continue and maybe reboot life, existence. What we think of as spirit will perhaps reboot, as we monkeys have indeed touched something.
Sorry, Gato.
Greetings, Moy, and thank you for your thought-provoking talk. And I do know you as a happy person. You and I have both spoken about our adventures, mine in running and yours in climbing. Something you said to me was very significant when you said, is there any hope for the world? I think the person before me also touched on that. As a hospice chaplain, I heard a lot of wishing, and I would often delineate to people the difference between wish and hope. For me, in my view, I think wish is built on fantasy and bypassing and wanting to have the world be the way you want it to be, or the way I want it to be. And that is a wish. And a wish is always tied with, magic and Disney and everything that is fantasy. Hope is based on reality. I'm not sure, and not bypassing, not using our practice as a bypass tool, but using it, for me, I use my practice as a grounding tool so that I can hope, I can say, I don't know what's going to happen, but to hope for an outcome that causes the least amount of suffering, knowing there will always be suffering in the world. There will always be Putins in the world. And in my view, there's probably someone or something out there that's worse and better. And that, to me, and that thin line between the worse, the better, the suffering, the not suffering, that's where the hope is. Thank you.
Thanks, Gato.
We've got just about a minute and a half here if somebody has a final question or comment. Mike, if not, I'll sneak one in. Oh, go ahead.
I'll just say one thing, like about my original talk, is that in my original sort of blurb on this talk, is that fun is actually a basic human need, and it's in reality theory or choice theory, and I think we can forget this in practice, and we can definitely forget this in activism. And when I look at animals, when I look at squirrels as they play around and they frolic, I realize that, for or for the creatures that I have access to seeing, it's not just about getting through the day or surviving or saving the planet or, whatever the agenda is. There's also this very important piece of life that includes lightness and frolicking and letting go of all of the have tos and responsibilities and all of that, and sinking into the joy of having a human body. And, when I'm in a yoga class and we're told to go into happy baby pose, it's this pose of like holding your feet up like a little baby and rolling around, and it reminds me every time of how babies, just like how much they just love having their bodies and playing around with their bodies and touching themselves and feeling the sensations of the human body. So yeah, on that note, adventure, like I just ask, like, do our lives, does your life feel like an adventure, or does it just feel like a rote following of have tos and to dos? And for me, life without adventure, why do it? And it's not an idea; it's a feeling. It's an experience of unknown and risk and playfulness and willingness and courage. As much as we can in the way it looks in our own lives. So, yeah.
Mike, thanks so much. And everybody, thank you for dialing in from a few of you from around the world. Wonderful. And Southern Hemisphere, Ovidio, thank you. Much appreciated. And Mike, what a wonderful topic. And, you just remind me the biggest risk, the biggest unknown, the biggest adventure in my life is what's going to happen literally next. And we're going to turn off this Zoom, and anything could happen, and I just don't know what that is. And that's quite adventurous. I love that. I embrace that. So thank you for the reminder. I really appreciate your talk.